pregnant. 5 months. The words fell from her lips like glass shattering on a hardwood floor. I just sat there frozen. Coffee going cold in my hands, eyes fixed on the girl sitting across from me. My baby sister, Emma. Her voice had barely been louder than a whisper, barely a breath. But it hit me like a gunshot in a silent room. The cafe around us kept humming, people laughing, milk frothing, a wind chime at the door jingling whenever someone walked in. But for me, the world had stopped. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Evergreen, Colorado, a town so small you could walk across it before your morning coffee cooled. The kind of place where everybody waves and everybody talks, especially when something goes wrong. Emma was sitting across from me at a booth in Charlie's Cafe, our childhood hangout. Her hoodie was zipped all the way up, hands clenched in her lap like she was hiding something much more than a growing belly. I hadn't seen her in weeks, not since she started acting distant, skipping family dinners, turning off her phone, and now I knew why. 5 months, I finally croaked, my voice hoarse from the punch it had taken. You're 5 months along, and you're just telling me now. She looked up at me with tear-glazed eyes, green, like our mom's, and I could see she hadn't slept in days. I didn't know how to tell you, she said softly, words trembling like leaves in the wind. I was scared. And Liam, he's gone. There it was. Another name. Another fracture in the story. Liam. I'd met him once. Business student. Sharp haircut. A smile that felt too perfect to be real. I didn't like him then. I hated him now. I leaned back, exhaling, heart thudding like a war drum in my chest. My mind raced. What do we do now? What would Mom and Dad say? No, scratch that. What would they do? In the Carter household, image was everything. Our father, Robert Carter, was the town's most respected lawyer. Sharp suits, sharper words, and a belief in legacy so deep. He framed family photos like court exhibits. Our mother, Margaret, taught literature at Evergreen High, raised on Steinbeck and structure. She believed in control, in discipline, in everything being just so. We were raised to be excellent, flawless, untouchable. I'd followed the script college, stable job, no surprises. Emma, she was the soft heart in a house of stone, a nursing student, the one who still believed in people, the one who colored outside the lines and danced in the kitchen barefoot. And now, she was alone, 5 months pregnant, abandoned by the guy who promised forever. I stared at her, a million thoughts crashing through my head. How could this have happened? But more importantly, how the hell was I going to protect her from the storm that was coming? Because I knew my parents, I knew our town, and I knew this secret wasn't going to stay buried much longer. Emma reached across the table. Her hand shook as it touched mine. Mitch, please don't tell Mom and Dad. Not yet. I didn't answer right away. My jaw tightened. My breath came short. And I stared at the raindrops racing each other down the window behind her, wondering how something so soft could break a world apart. Then I nodded, slowly, not because I agreed, but because in that moment, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, real gut-punching fear, and underneath it something even deeper, shame. It broke my heart, so I squeezed her hand, and I said the only thing I could think of. I've got you. Whatever happens, we're in this together, even if it meant going to war with the people who raised us, even if it meant turning my quiet, predictable life upside down. Because blood runs deep, but love, real love, it runs deeper. Growing up in the Carter household was like living in a picture frame, everything polished, symmetrical, and trapped in stillness. People in Evergreen used to say, we were the all-American family. Dad, the esteemed attorney who never lost a case. Mom, the high school teacher who quoted Shakespeare at PTA meetings. Me, the straight-A student with a Letterman jacket. Emma, the golden girl with perfect manners and the kind of smile that made neighbors coo. She's going to be something special. From the outside, we were untouchable. But behind closed doors, the silence was deafening. Dinner at 6 p.m. Sharp. Forks on the left. No elbows on the table. Conversation was fine, as long as it stayed within safe lanes grades. College prep. Community service. Feelings not on the menu. Love wasn't absent. It just wore disguises. Dad filling up our gas tanks without asking. Mom ironing our clothes to military precision. We never said I love you. We said, be careful, or don't embarrass us. I didn't question it back then. I thought that's just how families were. Structured, efficient, clean. But Emma, she always saw through it. She was the only one who ever dared to color outside the lines. While I was memorizing debate arguments and polishing my college essays, she was climbing trees barefoot, building fairy houses in the backyard, talking to birds like they were old friends. She was 5 when she caught me crying quietly in the garage, overwhelmed from a brutal scolding by Dad for missing honor society induction. She didn't say anything, just walked over and placed a plastic dinosaur in my lap. You don't need to be perfect, she whispered. Dinosaurs weren't perfect either, and they were awesome. I laughed through the tears. She had that magic Emma could pull light from the darkest places. We shared secrets in the attic, sneaking Oreos, writing dumb stories in a shared notebook, dreaming of a life where rules didn't exist. Our fortress was a twin mattress and string lights, the air thick with dust and possibilities. But as we got older, the pressure got louder. Dad drilled the idea of legacy into me like it was gospel. I was expected to be a Carter man, reliable, respected, stoic. Anything less disappointment. Emma was supposed to follow business, maybe pre-law, something respectable, something practical. But she wanted to be a nurse. Why Mom snapped one evening when Emma brought it up at dinner. You're smart enough for law school. Why settle? Emma looked down at her plate. Because I want to help people. That's what charity work is for, Dad muttered. That night, I found her in her room, curled up in bed, headphones on, eyes red. She didn't say much. I didn't press. I just lay beside her, letting the silence say what words couldn't. Sometimes, I wish I'd fought harder for her back then. Wish I'd said she's not settling. She's choosing something brave. But back then, I was too afraid to challenge the system that shaped us. The older we got, the more the cracks spread across our perfect portrait. Emma became quieter. She still smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She'd excuse herself early from family dinners. Started volunteering at the animal shelter. Worked weekends at a diner downtown just to feel something real. Meanwhile, I was already in Denver, working as a software engineer, trying to believe that I liked the monotony. I came back every few weekends. Same house, same routines. Emma's hugs a little longer each time, as if she needed them more than she let on. I didn't see it then. Didn't see how much weight she was carrying. The expectations, the shame, the longing for something more. And maybe the reason she fell for Liam Walker was because he saw her, not as a Carter, not as a disappointment, but as a person with dreams, softness, and fire. I used to think our childhood was solid. Now I know it was glass, beautiful, polished, and one secret away from shattering. Liam Walker. Even now, the name feels like smoke in my throat. I'd only met him once in the driveway of Emma's college dorm. He shook my hand too confidently, wearing that polished grin people wear when they're used to getting away with everything. Finance major, clean cut, Rolex on the wrist, future mapped out in hedge funds and high-rises. I didn't like him. Not because of the way he looked at Emma like she was lucky to be standing next to him, but because of the way she looked at him, like he was her escape, her way out of the Carter mold, her chance to feel Seen. When Emma told me his name that night in the cafe, I felt my stomach twist. He left, I asked, barely able to get the words out. She nodded just once, but it said everything. I told him 2 months ago. I thought maybe he'd stay. He said he needed time to think, and then he vanished, blocked my number, moved to San Francisco. She was trembling, and I was shaking with her, but not from fear, from rage, the kind that lives in your bones when someone hurts the one person you've sworn to protect. I wanted to drive to California that night, drag Liam Walker out of whatever shiny office he was hiding in, and make him look Emma in the eye. But I couldn't, because what Emma needed wasn't vengeance. She needed help. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered, though part of me already knew. Her lips parted, but no words came at first. Just the sound of her breath, shallow, uneven, breaking. I thought I could handle it, she said finally. I kept telling myself it would get better, that maybe, if I stayed strong, I could fix it. Her hands went to her stomach, almost reflexively, and for the first time, I saw the roundness there, the undeniable truth she had been hiding under oversized sweatshirts and silence. I looked up clinics. She continued, her voice brittle. I stood outside one for an hour, but I couldn't walk in. I felt like I'd be erasing something I hadn't even had a chance to understand. Her eyes found mine again, but then I thought, if I told Mom and Dad, they'd make the choice for me. And I couldn't let that happen. She wasn't wrong. I knew exactly what would happen if Margaret and Robert Carter found out their daughter was pregnant alone, unmarried, and with no plan that fit their blueprint of success. It wouldn't be concern. It would be scandal. And Emma, she wouldn't be their daughter anymore. She'd be a disgrace. They'd throw me out, she said flatly. Not with screaming, but with silence. The kind that freezes your bones. My fists were clenched so tight, I could feel my nails cutting into my palms. How could someone be so brave and feel so alone? You should have come to me, I said. I'm coming to you now, she whispered. That hit me hard. 5 months of carrying the weight of a secret this big, alone. 5 months of waking up every day, wondering who she'd be by nightfall. 5 months of pretending nothing was wrong in a town where everyone saw everything but never enough to care. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. You're not doing this by yourself anymore. And I meant it. Liam Walker may have started this story, but I was going to finish it with Emma. She wasn't broken. She was terrified. Maybe, but not broken. And I was going to stand beside her, even if that meant burning bridges I once thought were permanent. Even if it meant going against the very people who taught me how to walk. Because love isn't a perfect family portrait. It's showing up when it's messy, when it's hard, when someone needs you most. It was a gray Saturday afternoon when we pulled into the driveway of the house we grew up in. Same white siding, same porch swing that never squeaked, same lawn trimmed to obsessive perfection. It should have felt like home. But that day, it felt like a courtroom. Emma sat beside me in the passenger seat, bundled in a heavy coat despite the mild chill. Her hands were curled around her belly, shoulders rigid, breath shallow. I glanced at her. You don't have to do this, I said. She didn't answer, just nodded once, like someone walking into battle. We'd talked about this moment for days, gone over every possibility, every word she might say, every reaction they might give. But the truth was nothing prepared you for telling your parents the one thing they'd warned you never to become. We stepped onto the porch. I knocked. The door opened faster than expected. Mom stood there, Margaret Carter, iron-pressed and pearl-clad, eyes flicking between Emma and me with polite suspicion. Mitch, Emma, this is a surprise. I swallowed the tension in my throat. We need to talk, I said, voice tight. She stepped aside. The living room looked the same. Framed diplomas, mantelpiece clock ticking in judgment. Dad sat in his leather armchair, reading the Wall Street Journal like the world outside didn't exist. He glanced up. "Something wrong?" he asked. Emma sat down on the edge of the sofa. I stood behind her like a shield. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. Her voice was soft, but clear, braver than I'd ever heard it. "I'm pregnant." The silence hit like a sudden vacuum. No one breathed. Mom stopped mid-step, her hand tightening on the dish towel she'd been holding. Dad folded his paper slowly, each rustle like a warning shot. "How far?" he asked. Emma swallowed. 5 months. Mom's face contorted like she'd tasted something sour. "Who?" she demanded. "His name is Liam," Emma whispered. Dad stood. "You're keeping it," he said, no inflection, no warmth. "Yes, absolutely not," he said, voice rising. "You are not bringing a child into this world like this." "This world," I snapped. "What world are you living in, Dad?" "The 1950s. She's unmarried," he barked. "She's throwing away her future, our name, our reputation, our family." Mom cut in coldly, stepping closer. "Emma, how could you do this to us?" Emma stood, trembling but firm. "I didn't do this to you," she said. "This happened to me, and I'm choosing to face it." "That's not a choice," Dad growled. "That's selfishness, irresponsibility. If you won't terminate it, then you're no longer our daughter." I stepped forward then, heart pounding. "You don't get to say that," Mitch Mom started. "No," I said. "You don't get to draw lines and cut her out like she's some infection. She's your daughter, and she's scared, and you just..." Slammed the door in her face. "This isn't about emotion," Dad snapped. "It's about values." "Then your values are garbage," I said, eyes burning. He moved toward me fast, imposing, but I didn't flinch. "Get out," he said. "Both of you." Emma gasped softly behind me. "You're choosing your rules over your own children?" I asked, my voice cracking. Dad didn't respond. He just pointed at the door. Emma was crying now, silent tears trailing down her cheeks. Her lips pressed shut to keep the sobs inside. I turned to her, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come on," I whispered. "We're done here." As we walked out, Mom stood motionless near the fireplace. Her face didn't twitch, not even when the door closed behind us with a final thud. We got back in the car. The silence between us was thick. My hands were shaking on the wheel. Then Emma spoke, voice like broken glass. I thought maybe, deep down, they'd surprise me. I stared ahead, jaw clenched. "I know," I said quietly. She turned to me, tears still streaming, her voice barely a whisper. "Am I a mistake?" That shattered me. I pulled the car over, looked her in the eyes. "No," I said. "You're the strongest person I know. You made a hard choice, and you're not alone." She cried harder then, crumpling into my arms like a bird with clipped wings. And I held her, because if our parents couldn't be her home anymore, I would be. Even if the whole damn world turned its back, I'd still be there, always. The apartment wasn't built for two, let alone for a pregnant woman and a man who barely knew how to boil pasta. 700 square feet, 1 bedroom, a pull-out sofa that squeaked with every breath. But after that night at our parents' house, it became home. Emma moved in the next morning. She didn't bring much, just a duffel bag, a worn-out journal, and a folded sonogram photo she tucked inside her wallet like a secret only she was allowed to keep. I gave her the bedroom, moved my laptop and monitor out to the living room. The sofa became my new bed. My back would protest every morning, but I didn't care. She needed space. She needed safety. She needed me. The first week felt like wading through fog. Emma rarely spoke. She'd sit by the window for hours, staring at the snowy rooftops, one hand resting gently on her belly. I'd make grilled cheese or instant ramen, trying to coax her to eat. Most times, she'd just nod politely and push the food around her plate. I didn't push. I just stayed. Nights were the hardest. She'd cry when she thought I couldn't hear. Soft, muffled sobs coming from behind the bedroom door. And I'd lie there on the couch, eyes wide open, wishing I could bottle all that pain and carry it for her. I picked up extra freelance projects, coding late into the night, deadlines stacking up, sleep shrinking down to a couple hours. If that, some nights, my eyes burned so bad, I'd have to splash cold water on my face just to stay awake. But I didn't complain, because I was terrified of what would happen if I slowed down. Rent, groceries, doctor's appointments, prenatal vitamins. The cost of it all stacked higher than I could keep up with. But somehow every time I'd make it work. Emma didn't ask for anything, and that's what hurt the most. She moved through each day like she didn't want to take up space, folded her laundry with precision, kept her footsteps quiet. Sometimes she'd whisper thank you just for using the bathroom after me. I wanted to scream, "You don't have to apologize for existing," but I never said it. Instead, I tried to show her. I read parenting books, watched YouTube videos on how to swaddle a baby, how to help with morning sickness, how to be useful. I made charts for baby names. I left sticky notes on the fridge that said, "You're strong," or "You've got this." Most of them disappeared without a word, until one night. It was almost 2 a.m. I was staring blankly at my laptop screen, half asleep, when Emma shuffled out of the bedroom, hair messy, eyes puffy, holding a steaming mug in both hands. She placed it in front of me. "Chamomile," she said. "You've been coughing." I blinked. It took me a second to even register. "You didn't have to do that," I whispered. She gave me a faint smile. "You didn't have to do any of this." Silence hung between us for a second too long. Then she sat down next to me. We didn't say much, just sat. Her belly was visibly fuller now, and for the first time, I noticed her rub it absent-mindedly, like she'd finally begun to believe there was something real growing inside her. The next morning, we went grocery shopping. That was the first time the town really noticed. Evergreen is a small place. Word travels faster than wind. As we walked through the aisles, I could feel the stares, the curious glances, the whispered nothings that still sounded like daggers. "That's Robert Carter's daughter. She's pregnant. Out of wedlock. Is that her brother, poor guy?" Emma heard them, too. She gripped the cart tighter, her knuckles white. When we got to the cereal aisle, she turned to me, eyes full of shame. "I shouldn't have come." "No," I said, firmly. "They don't get to shame you into hiding." But I could tell. It got to her. After that, she barely left the apartment. Days blended into nights. I kept working. She kept reading. Stacks of nursing books appeared beside her bed. She watched videos about labor and breastfeeding, took online prenatal classes, highlighted like she was cramming for a final she'd never planned to take. And slowly, something changed. She laughed one afternoon, really laughed when I burned a grilled cheese so badly it looked like charcoal. She started leaving the bedroom door open. She let me feel the baby kick. And once, as I was folding laundry, she looked up from her book and said, "Mitch, I'm scared I won't be a good mom." I turned to her. "You already are," I said. "Because you care. Because you stayed. Because you're still trying. Even when it feels impossible." She blinked, then smiled. Not the sad kind. A real one. And for the first time since that night at the cafe, I felt something shift in the air. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were building something imperfect, messy, but ours. A kind of family that didn't need to be framed. The email came on a Thursday. I was on the couch, half asleep, answering work messages and pretending I didn't just spill coffee down my hoodie. Emma was in the kitchen, feeding Noah, who was now a full-blown toddler with more energy than a windstorm. He was giggling, face smeared with mashed bananas. When I heard the ping, I glanced at my phone. The sender made my blood turn cold. He is Liam Walker. I stared at the name like it was a ghost. 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of Emma raising Noah without so much as a postcard. 3 years of me staying up with the baby when he had colic, cutting crusts off sandwiches, saving for Dr. Bill's, being the one he ran to when he scraped his knee. Now suddenly, he wanted to talk. I opened the message. My hands were shaking. Mitch. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I wouldn't blame you if you never responded. But I need to talk to Emma. I made a mistake. A big one. I want to fix it. I want to meet my son. Please, just give me a chance. I didn't say anything right away. Emma walked into the living room holding Noah, who was babbling something about dinosaurs, and noticed my expression. Mitch, what's wrong? I looked up slowly. It's him. Her arms stiffened. Liam. I handed her the phone. She read it quietly. Her face didn't move, but her eyes, they shimmered. She sat down, Noah still in her lap, and read it again. He wants to meet him, she said under her breath. He wants to fix it. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her this man didn't deserve another second of her time, that real fathers didn't vanish when things got hard, that I had been the one who stayed. But instead, I asked the only question that mattered. What do you want? She hesitated. I don't know, she admitted. But maybe Noah deserves to know where he came from. That cut deeper than she knew. We agreed to meet Liam in Portland. Neutral ground, not evergreen, where whispers had teeth. Emma insisted on bringing me, and I didn't argue. I wasn't about to let her face that alone. He was already at the coffee shop when we walked in, wearing a tailored blazer, new haircut. Watch, that probably cost more than my rent. He stood when he saw us, eyes flickering between us, like he didn't know where to start. Emma, he said, and for the first time, I saw it, the nerves, the regret, the cracks. He glanced at me. Mitch. I didn't respond. We sat. Emma clutched her coffee like it was armor. I sat beside her, arms crossed. Liam began to speak. About the startup he joined in San Francisco. About how he panicked when she told him. How he wasn't ready. How he'd spent the last year in therapy. How money and success didn't fill the hole he carried. I think about him every day. He said, I want to meet him. Be part of his life. Help you. Both of you. Emma said nothing. So he kept going. I bought a house, he added, pulling out a manila folder. In Hood River. Right by the water. 4 bedrooms. Big yard. It's for you. For Noah. And Mitch. I blinked. You bought us a house, he nodded. It's already in your names. I just want to give something back. My fists clenched under the table. You think a house fixes 3 years, I snapped. No, he said quickly. I just want to do something right for once. Emma opened the folder, scanned the deed, her hands trembling. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. Then Liam reached into his jacket and placed a box on the table. I also want to marry you, he said. Silence. Not even the background music seemed to play. Emma stared at the box, at him. Liam, she whispered. You disappeared. You left me when I was terrified, when I needed you most. I know, he said, his voice breaking. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right. My jaw tightened. I wanted to throw the box out the window, but I looked at Emma, and I saw it, the conflict in her eyes, the war between the past and the future, the pain, the possibility. We didn't talk much on the drive home. A week passed, then another. Liam emailed, texted, sent toys, left voicemails, and Noah. God help me, started calling the stuffed bear Liam's bear, even though he had no idea what that meant. Emma finally spoke up one night, after Noah fell asleep. He's trying, she said. He shows up. He apologizes. He listens. And you believe him, I asked, trying not to sound bitter. I don't know, she admitted. But if there's even a small chance he means it, maybe I have to try. For Noah. I swallowed hard. I just don't want to lose you, I said, barely above a whisper. She reached out and took my hand. You won't. But I knew. Something was already shifting, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't just afraid of Liam hurting Emma again. I was afraid of him replacing me. Because no matter what the DNA said, for the last 3 years, I was the one Noah called Daddy, and I wasn't sure I could let that go. The wedding was small, elegant, and far too quiet for what it meant, held at a glass-walled venue in Seattle, overlooking the shimmering waters of Puget Sound. It looked like something out of a magazine, white roses lining the aisle, candles flickering in soft gold holders, strings of lights tracing the ceiling like stars that had come down to bear witness. Emma wore a simple ivory dress, hair braided back, glowing not just from makeup or lighting, but from something deeper. Peace, maybe. Or the weight of finally putting old wounds to rest. Liam stood beside her in a tailored gray suit, nervous but smiling, one hand slightly trembling as he adjusted his cufflink. He looked like a man reborn, but no matter how crisp the suit, I couldn't forget the version of him who left. I stood as best man, not because I wanted to, but because Emma asked me, and when she did, her voice cracked just enough to tell me it mattered. Noah wore a tiny navy vest and clip-on bow tie. He kept running in circles around Emma, holding a small ring pillow and giggling like this was just another game. To him, it was. To me, it was something else. A goodbye, a handoff. The end of the version of us that had once been only 3. I scanned the room once before the ceremony began. Empty chairs in the back row confirmed what I already knew. Our parents didn't come. We'd invited them. Emma had written the letter herself. Simple, direct, kind. She even included a photo of Noah, thinking it might soften something. It didn't, or maybe it did and they just couldn't face what they'd done. Either way, their absence hurt more than either of us admitted. The ceremony passed in a blur. Vows were said, rings exchanged. Applause rose like polite thunder, then drifted into the clinking of glasses and polite laughter. After the reception, I helped load the last of the boxes into Liam's SUV. They were moving that night across town, into a penthouse apartment overlooking the city skyline. Modern, open concept, rooftop patio, all the things I couldn't give her. Emma hugged me tight before they left. Come visit any time, she whispered. Noah needs his uncle. I didn't correct her, didn't remind her what he used to call me, what he might stop calling me soon. I just nodded and helped buckle Noah into his car seat. He grinned up at me, hands sticky from cupcake frosting. Daddy, are you coming too? My throat tightened. I forced a smile. Not today, buddy, but soon. They drove away, and I stood there long after the taillights disappeared. The house Liam gave us, the one in Hood River, nestled near the river bend, was beautiful, spacious, quiet, almost too quiet. I moved in alone. Emma had insisted. You've earned it, she said. It's yours as much as mine. But without Noah's laughter echoing through the hallways or Emma's humming from the kitchen, it didn't feel like mine. It felt like a museum of memories I wasn't allowed to touch. Then one rainy night, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not them. My parents stood on the porch, drenched, shivering under the yellow porch light. My mother's mascara was smudged. My father's shoulders slumped like something had finally cracked through his armor. Daniel, she began, voice barely audible over the rain. Can we come in? I stepped aside without a word. They sat on the couch like strangers. My father looked around the house like he was searching for a version of me he didn't recognize. My mother clutched her purse like it was the only solid thing she had left. I was wrong, she said. We were so wrong. My father nodded, not the stern, judgmental nod I'd grown up with, but one that came with tears he didn't try to hide. I didn't know how to fix it, he whispered. And the longer I waited, the more ashamed I became. They asked about Emma, about Noah. They asked if there was still a chance to make things right. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw back every moment of silence, every rejection, every tear Emma cried into her pillow. But then I thought of Noah, of how he deserved to know where he came from, good, bad, or somewhere in between. She forgave Liam, I said, my voice steady. Maybe she can forgive you too. My mother sobbed. My father reached across and gripped my shoulder. You held this family together, he said, voice breaking. When we fell apart, they stayed for tea. Nothing fancy, just 2 mugs, a quiet fire, and a few long overdue truths. And for the first time in years, something unfamiliar settled into the room. Grace. Not perfection, not resolution, but something close to healing. Something like home. There's a kind of love no one prepares you for. It's not romantic. It doesn't come with flowers or dates or fireworks. It's quieter, stronger. The kind of love that picks up the phone at 3 a.m., that learns how to warm bottles, that holds someone when their world is falling apart, even when your own isn't far behind. That's what Emma gave to Noah, and what I tried imperfectly to give to both of them. I used to think being a brother meant cheering from the sidelines, showing up at graduations, sending birthday cards. I didn't realize it could mean becoming a second parent, a shield, a place to land when everything else collapses. For 3 years, I changed diapers with shaking hands, heated soup at 2 a.m., learned how to decode baby cries and calm midnight panic attacks. I took on work I didn't want just to pay bills I never asked for. I became the soft voice in a storm I didn't start. And through it all, I never once regretted it. Not the lost sleep, not the quiet heartbreak, not even when Noah stopped calling me daddy. Because sometimes, the deepest kind of love doesn't need a title. It just is, and that's the lesson I carry. We don't get to choose how life twists, but we get to choose who we become when it does. We get to decide, do we show up, even when we're tired? Do we hold people tighter when the world tries to push them away? Do we stand in the fire, or do we walk out, blaming the heat? Emma stood in it. She could have given up, could have buried the truth, let shame decide the future. But she didn't. She chose to keep the baby, to keep going, to try even when trying meant facing judgment, silence, abandonment, and Liam, for all his failures, came back, late, yes, but different, humble, not begging to erase the past, but offering to earn a place in the future. People can change, but they have to want it. They have to bleed for it, and most of all, they have to prove it with actions, not just words. Then there's our parents. They taught us discipline, tradition, reputation, but not softness, not grace. Yet somehow, through distance and regret, they found their way back, not as the people we once needed, but as the people they were trying to become. And maybe that's enough, because family isn't built in perfect living rooms or holiday cards. It's built in broken moments, in apologies that come late, in second chances offered, even when you swore you were done. You don't have to be biologically connected to be someone's parent. You don't need a marriage license to be someone's home. You just have to show up, again and again, especially when it's hard. So if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that love isn't loud. It's not always beautiful. It doesn't always win on schedule. But it endures, even through the mess, even through silence, even through goodbye. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it brings you full circle, to a dinner table where laughter feels like healing, to a child's arms thrown around your neck without hesitation, to a front porch where the past stands in the rain, and the door still opens. Because in the end, that's what family really means. Not never falling apart, but always finding a way back.